"Take your brat and get the hell out of here," my husband yelled in the middle of our divorce hearing. But the moment the judge read out my inheritance, the whole courtroom froze. Hello, my dear friends. Tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Enjoy the story. Take your brat and get the hell out of here. Daniel barked so loudly that his voice echoed off the peeling walls of the courtroom and made even the indifferent clerk flinch. I sat on the hard, creaky chair and looked at the man I had lived with for 26 years. 26 years. That's more than half my life. I knew every one of his habits, every tone of his voice, every gesture. I remembered how he liked his morning coffee with 2 spoonfuls of sugar, how he wrinkled his nose when something went wrong, how he used to laugh, long ago, when we were still young and happy. Now, a stranger stood before me. Daniel towered in the middle of the courtroom, red with anger, and I could almost feel the waves of his contempt. His suit fit him perfectly. Dark blue, expensive, clearly tailored, with a crisp white shirt and a burgundy tie. The cufflinks on his sleeves gleamed with every movement. Manicured hands, trendy haircut, a light tan. As if he'd just come back from some resort. Which, most likely, he had. Beside him, on the spectator bench, sat her. Alina. I knew her name, though I'd have preferred not to. Young, maybe 30, in a tight emerald green dress. She looked at me with that unmistakable expression, "I've won." "You've lost." Her lips curved in a faint smile. Not gloating, worse. Condescending. Like she was looking at a pitiful defeated rival who hadn't even been worth the fight. The judge, a woman in her late 50s with a tired face and a tight bun at the back of her head, lifted her eyes from the papers. Her thin-framed glasses had slid down her nose, and she pushed them back up with a habitual gesture. "Mr. Collins, I'm asking you to maintain order in this courtroom," she said in an even, cold tone, one used by people who'd seen hundreds of divorces in their lifetime. "Take your seat. One more outburst like that, and I'll have you removed." Daniel sat down but didn't calm down. He leaned back in his chair with the air of someone who'd just been unfairly reprimanded, though he was completely in the right. His eyes bored into me heavy, full of that self-righteous fury, as if I had destroyed our family, I had cheated, I had been the one to throw those words in his face 3 months ago. "I'm leaving. I'm 39, and I'm not spending the rest of my life with a barn hen." That's what he used to call me. A barn hen. Me, Linda, who, 30 years ago, had been a slim girl with a long braid and dreams of great love. His lawyer, a slick man in glasses and a gray 3-piece suit that reeked of expensive cologne even from several feet away, flipped through his papers with the confidence of someone who already knew how this would end. He kept glancing at Daniel, nodding, patting him on the shoulder as if to say, "Don't worry, I've got this. We'll shred her to pieces in no time." And me? I was just tired. Tired of these 3 months of war, of endless trips to offices, of hearings, of neighbors whispering about my divorce behind my back. Tired of how the man I'd given the best years of my life now looked at me. As if I didn't exist. As if I never had. The court clerk, a thin woman around 40, with faded hair tied in a ponytail, typed monotonously on an old keyboard, recording every word. The clicking of the keys filled the silence, setting a nervous rhythm. The room smelled institutional stale air, dust, dampness, something sour. The radiators barely worked, even though it was November, and the damp Seattle fall ruled outside. The walls were painted a dull beige, the paint peeling in places to reveal gray concrete. A worn-out chandelier hung overhead, with only 3 of its 5 bulbs still working. Next to me sat my lawyer, Martha Johnson. A friend of my friend Tammy, who worked as a school vice principal. A modest woman in her mid-50s, with a gentle face and kind eyes, dressed in a simple dark suit that had clearly seen better days. Her briefcase was battered, the corners cracked, the faux leather peeling. But Martha tried her best. She spread out her papers, underlined things, scribbled notes in the margins, occasionally leaning toward me to whisper words of encouragement. Next to Daniel's attorney, we looked like David against Goliath. Actually, worse. We looked doomed. I glanced at Daniel again. He sat there, leaning back in his chair, leg crossed over leg, scrolling through his expensive smartphone. He didn't even pretend to care. For him, this was already over. His lawyer would get him everything: the apartment we bought 10 years ago, with my money, too, the lake house near Bellingham, his share in the construction company. and I'd get the scraps. Maybe some alimony for our son, though James had turned 18 in September. He was legally an adult now, free to choose where to live. James was there, too, sitting behind me. I could feel his presence, the way only a mother can sense her child without seeing him. Tall, thin, wearing his old jacket and jeans, a backpack at his feet. A freshman at the University of Washington, studying computer science. A smart, kind boy. When his father left, he told me, "Mom, I'm with you. Always." Those words had been the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. "Your Honor," Daniel's attorney began in a silky, syrupy tone, rising from his chair and stepping forward. He spoke slowly, deliberately, as if addressing an audience rather than the judge. "My client is prepared to present a full financial report proving that all assets in question were acquired solely through his own efforts, his work, his entrepreneurial skill. The wife, Linda, during the marriage, did not contribute to the establishment or development of the business. She focused exclusively on homemaking and childcare, which, while important, does not entitle her to claim the results of her husband's labor. My client is willing to offer reasonable compensation and provide modest housing for his former spouse, but nothing beyond that." Lies. Shameless, blatant, cynical lies that made my breath catch. I clenched my fists under the table so hard my nails dug into my palms. Didn't contribute? 25 years ago, I sold the gold earrings my grandmother had given me to help Daniel start his first business, a cigarette kiosk on our street corner. I borrowed money from my parents, from my sister, so he could buy the space for his first hardware store. I worked 2 jobs, accountant by day, math tutor by night, because we were always short on money, and he needed to reinvest. I did his accounting myself for the first 5 years, until he could afford to hire a professional. Homemaker? Sure, I was. I washed his shirts, cooked his meals, ironed his suits when he started meeting clients. Woke up at 5 every morning to make him breakfast, because he said he couldn't function without a hot meal. Came home from work and went straight to the stove. Soups, meatloaf, pies on weekends. Canned cucumbers and tomatoes for winter. Made jam, pickled vegetables, because he liked everything fresh and homemade. And I raised James practically on my own, because Daniel was always too busy. Meetings, trips, partners, contracts. I took our son to daycare, then school, helped him with homework, took him to karate, then to coding classes, sat by his bed when he was sick, spent sleepless nights when he had a fever, went to parent-teacher meetings, handled every problem. And Daniel? He came home tired, grumpy, sat in front of the TV with a beer and said, "Leave me alone, I'm exhausted." I work for both of you. Martha placed a warm, reassuring hand on my shoulder. She could tell I was on the edge. Just then, the door creaked open, and a middle-aged man in a dark coat stepped inside. He was holding a large brown envelope sealed with red wax. Moving quietly along the wall, trying not to draw attention, he approached the clerk, leaned over, and whispered something in her ear. She nodded, took the envelope, stood, and brought it to the judge. The judge looked up from the transcript she'd been reviewing. She turned the envelope over in her hands, examined the seal, frowned. Then she carefully slid it open with a letter knife, pulled out several sheets of thick, high-quality paper stamped and signed in blue ink, and began to read. I watched her face change. First surprise, her eyebrows lifted slightly. Then confusion. She turned the page, then another. And then something like astonishment. She even took off her glasses, wiped them with a handkerchief, put them back on, and reread. The courtroom fell silent. Even the clerk stopped typing. Daniel's lawyer fell silent mid-sentence, sensing something unusual. The judge slowly raised her eyes and looked straight at me. There was something new in her gaze, not the weary indifference from before, but genuine interest, even curiosity. "Mrs. Collins," she said clearly, "are you aware of the contents of these documents?" I shook my head, startled. My heart began pounding wildly. "No, Your Honor." 3 weeks ago, a notary called me. He said a distant relative had passed away, my Aunt Elizabeth. My mother's aunt. We'd only met a few times in my life, the last time maybe 15 years ago. He mentioned an inheritance, asked me to come in to sign some papers. But I thought. I hesitated, feeling my cheeks burn. I thought it was something small. Old furniture, maybe some books. Or a little apartment somewhere out in the suburbs. The notary said the documents would be ready by today, and he'd deliver them. I see, the judge nodded. She looked at the papers again, then turned to Daniel and his attorney. Daniel frowned. Alina leaned forward, trying to get a glimpse of the papers. His lawyer adjusted his glasses, clearly uneasy. What is it? Daniel snapped. What inheritance? The judge gave him a cold look. Mr. Collins, you will receive all necessary information in due course. She returned to reading. Flipped to the last page, lingered there, reading more carefully. I could see her lips moving silently as she traced the lines. Time seemed to stop. Cold sweat trickled down my back. What could it be? Could Aunt Elizabeth really have left me something significant? But how? She'd been a language teacher all her life, lived alone in a small apartment, never married, had no children. Though I remembered she'd spent her later years somewhere abroad, Austria or Germany, maybe. Mom used to say Aunt Elizabeth had left the country through some teaching program and ended up staying there. But still, what could she possibly have had? The judge finally set the papers down, took off her glasses, and placed them on the table. She looked at me, then at Daniel, then back at me again. And for a brief moment, I caught something on her face, something like quiet satisfaction. Subtle, almost invisible, but I saw it. Well, she said softly, yet every word echoed through the room. I believe these documents changed the situation quite significantly. I'll need a few minutes to review all the circumstances of the case in light of this new information. Court is in recess for 15 minutes. She stood up, gathered the papers, and walked into her chambers. I stayed in my seat, not understanding what was happening at all. Behind me, I heard James's voice. Mom, are you okay? I turned around. He was standing beside me, tall, worried, and so much like me. The same gray eyes, the same stubborn jawline. I don't know, James, I whispered. Honestly, I don't know. Daniel had already stormed out into the hallway, dragging his lawyer along. I could hear their agitated voices, arguments, guesses, speculation. Martha said nothing. She just stared thoughtfully at the judge's door. What happened 15 minutes later turned everything upside down. While the judge reviewed the papers in her office and I tried to calm my racing heart, my mind drifted back 27 years. I met Daniel in 1997. I was 22, he was 25. It was a warm August evening in Seattle, one of those nights when the sun lingered on the horizon. I worked as an accountant in a small office and rented a room on Capitol Hill with my friend Tammy. That night, we went out dancing at a local club. They had live music on weekends, and young people gathered there to hang out. Daniel came with his friends. Tall, lean, with dark curly hair and a charming smile. He was dressed simply: jeans, a white shirt, worn sneakers, but he carried himself with confidence, talking loudly, laughing easily. He noticed me almost right away. I was standing by the wall in my best dress, a blue one with little flowers that I had sewn myself out of one of Mom's old dresses. My hair was long, braided down to my waist. He walked up to me and asked me to dance. We danced the whole evening. Then he walked me home, and we strolled across the city talking about everything under the sun. He told me about his dreams to start his own business, make money, build a big house, buy a car. Back then, everyone talked like that. Everyone dreamed of success, of a better life just around the corner, once the country recovered from the recession and opportunities appeared again. I listened and I believed him. I believed every word. We started dating. He'd come to see me after work, bringing flowers, cheap asters from the market, but to me they were more beautiful than roses. We took walks around the city, rode the ferry to Bremerton, sat on park benches, kissed. He told me I was the most beautiful, the smartest woman he'd ever met, that he was lucky to have found me. 6 months later, he proposed. No rings, no restaurant, no grand gestures. One night in my little kitchen, he just said, "Linda, let's get married." And I said, "Let's do it." The wedding was simple. We signed the papers at City Hall, then celebrated at his parents' apartment. A small place in a concrete building in Tacoma. His parents were ordinary people, his father a mechanic at a factory, his mother a nurse at a clinic. They set the table with homemade food salads, roasted chicken, potatoes, snacks. There was some wine, a few toasts, some laughter. That was our wedding. Nobody had much money, but we didn't care. We were happy. We lived with his parents at first, sharing one room. It was cramped and uncomfortable, but we didn't complain. I kept working as an accountant, and Daniel got a job as a foreman at a construction company. The pay was small, but he promised it was temporary, that things would change soon. A year later, James was born. The delivery was difficult. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital. Daniel came every day, standing under the window and waving to me. When we were discharged, he carried our son in his arms so carefully, so tenderly. I'll never forget that. He was happy. We both were. But once the baby came, the expenses grew: diapers, formula, clothes, medicine. Everything cost money. I had to quit my job, and my paycheck disappeared. We lived on Daniel's modest salary and the tiny government benefit I received. We saved every penny. I stopped buying new clothes, altered and mended the old ones. Cooked the simplest meals: porridge, soups, pasta. We had meat only on holidays. Daniel grew restless. He wanted more, faster, better. He said he was suffocating in poverty, that he had to do something. Then one day, when James was 2, he came home with fire in his eyes and announced, "That's it. I'm quitting. I'm going to work for myself." I panicked. "What do you mean, for yourself? With what money?" But he'd already made up his mind. He'd found a small kiosk for rent on the corner of our street. He wanted to sell cigarettes, beer, chips. It required a $10,000 deposit plus the first month's rent. We didn't have that kind of money. So I sold my earrings. The gold ones with tiny garnets, my grandmother's gift before she passed away. They were my only real treasure, my only keepsake from her. Grandma had said, "Keep them safe, sweetheart, for a rainy day." That rainy day had come. I took them to a pawn shop and got the money we needed. I handed it all to Daniel. He hugged me, kissed me, swore he'd pay it back tenfold, that in a year our lives would be different. The kiosk worked. Daniel threw himself into it, working from dawn till night, 7 days a week. He came home exhausted and fell asleep immediately. I barely saw him, just in the mornings when he left and late at night when he returned. James was growing up without a father. I took him for walks, fed him, put him to bed, sang lullabies, read stories, all on my own. A year later, the kiosk started turning a profit. Small but steady. Daniel was energized, determined to expand. He opened a second kiosk, then a third. Hired clerks. Money started coming in. We finally moved out of his parents' place and rented a 1-bedroom apartment. Tiny, but ours. It felt like a dream to have our own space, our own kitchen, no more sharing a bathroom. James started daycare. I went back to work as an accountant again, this time in an office closer to home. I worked half days, then rushed to pick up James. In the evenings, I cooked dinner, cleaned, did laundry, ironed. Daniel came home late, ate in silence, watched TV, and went to bed. That's how the years went by. The kiosks grew, and then he sold them and opened a small hardware store. He needed money for stock and renovations. I asked my parents for a loan. They gave us their last savings, $50,000. My sister Olivia lent us another $30,000. All of it went into the business. The store took off. Daniel hired staff, started traveling to buy supplies in bulk. Business got better. We bought our first car used, but to us it was a dream come true. Later, we saved enough to buy a small apartment in a new building. We finally moved out of the rental and started making it our home. James went to school. A bright, well-behaved kid. I took him to karate. He said he wanted to be strong and protect his mom. Later, he got into computers, so I enrolled him in a coding class. It was expensive, but I didn't care. I worked 2 jobs: accountant by day, math tutor by evening. Every dollar went to James, the apartment, or Daniel's business. He kept expanding. Opened a second store, then a third. Registered a company, hired an accountant. I still helped handling part of the paperwork at home, reviewing reports, doing calculations. For free, of course. It's a family business, Daniel would say. A few more years passed. James was about 12 when we finally bought a 3-bedroom condo. In a new neighborhood, in a nice building, fully renovated. It felt like such an achievement. I cried tears of joy when we moved in. Our own home spacious, bright. James had his own room. Daniel and I had a bedroom. A kitchen. Daniel bought an expensive car, started dressing better suits, shirts. He went to business meetings, met new partners. I was happy for him, thinking, finally, we made it. We can live peacefully now. But something began to change. Daniel started working late, coming home later and later, sometimes after midnight. He said it was business, meetings, negotiations. I believed him. I made dinner, waited up, reheated the food. He'd eat in silence, answering my questions with one-word replies. Then he started getting irritated, asking why I was interrogating him, if I didn't trust him, if I didn't see how hard he worked for this family. I stopped asking questions. He started to change on the outside first. Joined a gym, lost weight, got in shape, changed his haircut to something trendy, began to take care of himself. Creams, lotions, cologne. I thought maybe it was just for business, for his image. I didn't give it much thought. Then came the business trips. At first short ones, 2 or 3 days, then week-long ones. New York, Los Angeles, Chicago. I stayed home alone with James, working and keeping the house running. Daniel called rarely, briefly - everything's fine, just busy, and hung up. James turned 16. He was studying hard, preparing for exams, determined to get into the University of Washington to study programming. Smart, focused kid. I was proud of him. Daniel seemed proud too, but they barely talked. Daniel was always busy, James was too with school, computers, friends. And I started feeling empty. Daniel looked at me as if I were a piece of furniture. I no longer interested him. I was just convenient. I cooked, cleaned, did laundry, handled all the housework. But as a woman I stopped existing. He no longer kissed me. No longer hugged me. Not even simple heart-to-heart talks. Whenever I tried to bring up our relationship, he'd brush me off. I don't have time for your sentimental nonsense. I'm making money. I tried to change. Dyed my hair, bought a new dress, joined a gym. Tried to look better, younger. But he didn't notice. He'd come home, mumble a greeting, and lock himself in his office with his laptop. One evening, I walked in with a cup of tea. He was sitting at his computer, headphones on, didn't even hear me come in. On the screen was a chat window in some social media app. I caught a glimpse of it, a woman's name, heart emojis, smiley faces. I set the cup down loudly on the table. He flinched, quickly closed the window, and turned around. "What do you want?" he snapped. "I brought you tea," I said quietly. "Thanks. You can go." I left the room, sat down in the kitchen. My hands were shaking. Who was she? The messages looked way too intimate. But maybe I was mistaken. Maybe I imagined it. I tried to talk to him the next day when he was home. I asked directly, "Dan, are we okay?" He looked surprised. "What kind of question is that? It just feels like you've grown distant. Like we've become strangers." He sighed, rubbed his face. "Linda, you overthink everything. I've got business, problems, responsibilities. I'm under pressure. And you're coming at me with feelings. Just let me work in peace." I went quiet. I told myself maybe he was just stressed. He needed support, not nagging. But in February, when James turned 17, the thing I'd been dreading happened. I got a call from an unknown number. A young woman's voice, calm, slightly mocking. "Is this Linda? Daniel's wife?" "Yes," I said, my heart pounding. "This is Alina. I work with your husband. I just wanted to let you know we've been seeing each other for 6 months now. He promised to divorce you, but he's dragging his feet. So I'm calling myself. He loves me, not you. Let him go." And she hung up. I stood in the middle of the kitchen, phone in hand, unable to breathe. Everything inside me just collapsed. An affair. 6 months. Another woman. That evening Daniel came home like nothing had happened. I met him in the hallway and said, "Alina called me." He froze. His face went pale, then red. Finally, he exhaled and said, "Well, good. I guess it's better you know. I didn't want to tell you, but since you found out, yes. I'm seeing someone else. I love her. I'm sorry, Linda, but it happened. I can't live with you anymore. You're a good person, but we've grown apart. I've changed. I need something different. I want a divorce." Just like that. 26 years together and just like that. Plain, casual, as if you were talking about the weather. I asked, "What about James?" "James is an adult. He'll manage. I'll pay alimony, help out. But I can't live here anymore." He packed his things that very night. A suitcase, a duffel bag. I sat in the kitchen, staring out the window. James was at a friend's house. He didn't see any of it. Daniel walked out, slammed the door, and never came back. Then came the nightmare. A week later, he filed for divorce. Demanded to keep the entire business and most of the apartment. Claimed he'd earned it all himself. Offered me a small payout and a one-bedroom place somewhere on the edge of town. I hired a lawyer, Martha Johnson. Fought tooth and nail to prove I'd invested money, worked, helped build everything. But there were no records. I'd sold my earrings without any receipt. My parents' money had been given informally, as family help. All the company paperwork had been done without me. Daniel grew nasty. Called me a hen, a parasite. Said I'd lived off him my whole life, that he'd supported me and our son. That I'd done nothing but cook and clean. James took my side. Refused to talk to his father. Daniel tried to bribe him, "I'll buy you a car, an apartment if you back me up." James said no. And now here we were, in court. Daniel confident of victory, me exhausted and hollowed out. And then, those strange papers from the notary. I was pulled back to the present. The judge came out of her office. Her face was unreadable. She sat down, arranged the documents on the table. The room fell silent. "Everyone, please take your seats," she said firmly. "We'll resume the hearing." The judge cleared her throat, put on her glasses, and picked up the same documents the stranger had delivered. I sat with my arms crossed, trying to still the trembling in my hands. What could possibly be in those papers that made her stop the hearing and study them so closely? But before she began to speak, I suddenly remembered that phone call, the one that had come 3 weeks earlier, the one I hadn't taken seriously at the time. It was late October, a Tuesday, around 6 in the evening. I came home from work exhausted, kicked off my shoes, went to the kitchen to boil some water for tea. James was in his room, working on a college project. The apartment was quiet, empty. Without Daniel, the house felt orphaned. Even when he'd been gone before, his presence lingered somehow. But now? Just emptiness. The phone rang just as I was taking yesterday's soup out of the fridge. Unknown number. I thought, great, another telemarketer or a bank offer. But I answered anyway. "Hello," I said wearily. "Good evening. Is this Linda?" A man's voice, polite, with a light European accent. "My name is Edward Behrens. I'm a notary in Vienna. I'm calling on behalf of my late client, Elizabeth Gray. Please accept my condolences. Your aunt passed away on October 10th at the age of 83. I sank into a chair. Aunt Elizabeth. My mom's aunt, my grandmother's sister. I barely remembered her, had only met her a few times. The last time was when I was about 25. She'd come to Seattle for a couple of days. We met at a cafe, talked about this and that. She was a strict, slender woman with gray hair and a bun, glasses perched on her nose. A German teacher who had worked in schools her entire life. "Thank you," I said automatically. "But I don't understand why you're calling me. We hardly ever spoke." "I understand," he said gently. "The reason for my call is that Elizabeth left a will and you are her sole heir." I blinked. "Heir? Me? That must be some kind of mistake. Didn't she have, I don't know, other relatives? We barely kept in touch. No mistake. Miss Gray was very specific in her instructions. There are no other living relatives on the Gray side. Your mother, her niece, passed away 5 years ago, correct? Yes, that's right. Then the inheritance passes to you. I rubbed my forehead, my head buzzing from fatigue and this flood of information. Okay. What exactly did she leave? An apartment? The notary paused briefly, then said, not only that. There are several properties, securities, and bank accounts. I can't discuss the details over the phone, it's confidential. We'll need to meet in person to finalize the paperwork. Or I can travel to you if that's more convenient. It'll take some time to prepare all the documents, verify your kinship, and register ownership. Several properties? I repeated. You mean more than one apartment? Yes. As I said, I can't go into detail over the phone. Could you tell me when it would be convenient to meet? I looked at the calendar on the fridge. The divorce hearing was scheduled in 3 weeks. Work, lawyers, endless consultations. My head was spinning. I'm going through a really hard time right now, I admitted. I'm getting divorced. The court hearing is in 3 weeks. Can I postpone this until after? Of course you can. But by law, you have 6 months to accept the inheritance. I'd recommend not waiting too long. Part of the estate is located abroad, and there are separate deadlines and bureaucratic steps there. The sooner we start the process, the better. Abroad? I asked, completely thrown off. Where? In Austria. Elizabeth spent the last 20 years of her life in Vienna. She owned an apartment there and had accounts in local banks. But again, we can go over the details when we meet in person. I closed my eyes for a moment. Too much information. Too complicated. My head was splitting. All right, I exhaled. Let's do this. My court date is in 3 weeks, November 30th. You can come by then. We'll take care of whatever's needed. I really can't think straight right now. November 30th, he repeated, jotting something down. Perfect. I'll fly to Seattle on the 29th and bring all the documents with me. We can meet at my hotel or anywhere convenient for you. Or, if you prefer, I can deliver the documents directly to the court so you won't have to make another trip. To the court? Why? Well, in case there's any division of property involved. Inheritance isn't considered marital property, and that's important to establish legally. The judge should take it into account during the proceedings. I didn't pay much attention to what he said. I thought, what inheritance could that even be? Probably just an old apartment, maybe some savings. Hardly more than $100,000. Pocket change compared to what Daniel was dividing his business alone was worth $2 or $3 million, plus our 3-bedroom condo worth about $600,000, plus the lake house, the cars. All right, I agreed. Come by then. Here's my address. I dictated it. Excellent. I look forward to meeting you. And again, please accept my condolences. The call ended. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the phone. James came out of his room and looked at me. Mom, you look pale. What happened? Oh, it's nothing, I waved it off. A notary called. Turns out Aunt Elizabeth passed away. My mom's aunt, you never met her. I'm sorry, James said seriously. He was such a good kid, always tuned into how I felt. Why was the notary calling? She left me an inheritance. Some apartment, I guess. Oh. James perked up. That's good. Maybe you can sell it and get some money. Maybe, I nodded tiredly. I'll figure it out after the hearing. I didn't tell Daniel about that call. Why would I? We hadn't spoken in 3 months, only through lawyers. And besides, what was the point? The inheritance was my personal matter. And honestly, I didn't think it was anything major. The next 3 weeks flew by in chaos. Work, meetings with Martha, preparing paperwork, sleepless nights. Daniel's lawyer kept bombarding us with requests, demands, and claims. I felt trapped, cornered. Martha did her best, but I could see it our chances were slim. Everything was registered under Daniel's name. The company is. The apartment officially joint property, but he claimed he'd paid for it entirely and demanded a bigger share. The lake house also is. I couldn't prove anything. How could I? No receipts showing I'd sold my earrings. No written loan from my parents. No paperwork proving I'd helped with the business. The only thing I could hope for was half of the apartment and a small settlement. No child support. James was 18 now. Daniel was gloating. I could tell from the tone of his lawyer's messages. One evening, about 5 days before the court date, my old friend Tammy came over. We used to rent an apartment together back in the day. She was a plump, kind woman who worked as a school administrator. We sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and eating cookies. "Linda, are you holding up?" she asked, worry in her eyes. "I'm managing," I nodded, though in truth I was barely holding it together. "That jerk," Tammy shook her head. "You were together 26 years. You gave him your whole life, and now this? I remember how much money you gave him, how you pulled him up. Without you, he'd still be selling cigarettes from that kiosk." "Maybe," I said quietly. "But it doesn't matter anymore. What matters is James. I just don't want him to suffer. James is a great kid. He did the right thing standing by you. Let his father live with that floozy." I saw her once, ran into her at the mall. Nose in the air, strutting around in her fur coat and heels. And her eyes? Empty. Just a painted-up fool. I smiled faintly. Tammy always knew how to make me feel better. "Oh, and the notary called," I remembered. "About 3 weeks ago. Something about an inheritance from Aunt Elizabeth. He'll be here by the 30th to finalize everything." "Inheritance?" Tammy perked up. "That's great. Maybe it's something valuable." I doubt it, I waved her off. Aunt Elizabeth was a teacher her whole life. Probably just an apartment or something. Though he mentioned Vienna, which is odd. But honestly, I don't even want to think about it. I've had enough problems already. "Linda," Tammy said, taking my hand, "you're carrying too much on your shoulders. You need a break. How about a movie this weekend?" "After the hearing," I promised. "After court, everything will settle down. Somehow." On Friday, November 29th, I got a call from Notary Behrens. He said he'd arrived in Seattle, staying at a downtown hotel, and would come to court in the morning with all the documents. I agreed without even thinking. My mind was too consumed with the trial. That night, I barely slept. Tossed and turned, staring at the ceiling. Wondering what would happen tomorrow? What would become of me? I was 49. Half my life was gone. My husband had left. My son would soon start his own life. What would be left for me? The next morning, November 30th, I got up early. Put on my strict dark gray business suit, the one I usually wore to work. No makeup, just a little powder to hide the dark circles under my eyes. I pulled my hair back into a simple bun. Looked in the mirror. A tired middle-aged woman stared back, sad eyes, slumped shoulders. Where was that girl with the long braid who once danced in a club 27 years ago? James came out of his room already dressed. He insisted on coming with me to support me. "Mom, it'll be okay," he said, hugging me. "Somehow, it'll all work out." We left the house. It was cold and windy outside. November in Seattle, wet, gray, unfriendly. We took the bus, got off near the courthouse, and walked the rest of the way. Martha was waiting for us at the entrance. She looked uneasy. "Good morning, Linda," she said. "I've been reviewing the documents about your inheritance. The notary called me yesterday and sent copies. Do you have any idea what's in there?" "No," I admitted. "I didn't really ask. He said something about an apartment." Martha gave me a strange look. "Linda, it's not just an apartment. It's..." She hesitated, choosing her words. "Well, you'll hear it yourself in a moment. The notary's already inside, waiting in the hallway. Come on." We entered the building. In the corridor outside our courtroom stood a man in his 60s, wearing a gray coat and a scarf. Neat, well-kept, with silver hair and intelligent eyes behind glasses. He saw us and walked over. "Linda," he said, extending his hand. "Edward Barons. Nice to finally meet you in person." "Likewise," I replied, shaking his hand. "I brought all the documents sealed and notarized. I'll deliver them directly to the judge, if you don't mind. It's the proper legal procedure." "I don't mind," I said. He took a large brown envelope from his briefcase, the same one that would later be brought into the courtroom. "Tell me," I couldn't resist asking, "what exactly is in there? What kind of inheritance are we talking about?" Edward looked at me steadily. "Your Aunt Elizabeth was an extraordinary woman. She taught German all her life but moved to Vienna 20 years ago. There, she worked as a translator for a large publishing company. She earned well, saved carefully, invested wisely. Bought an apartment in central Vienna. In addition, she inherited a share in a family business from distant Austrian relatives. Her grandmother came from a Viennese family. It's a small but profitable publishing house. She also had securities and bank accounts in Austria and Switzerland. She left it all to you. The total value of the estate is about 3 million euros, maybe a little more." I didn't understand. I simply didn't process the words. "How much?" I asked faintly. 3 million euros. That's approximately. He calculated quickly in his head, $3.5 million at the current rate. My head started spinning. I grabbed the wall for support. "Mom." James caught me by the arm. "Are you okay?" I don't understand," I whispered. "There must be a mistake." "That can't be true." "It's no mistake," the notary said gently. "Everything's been verified and notarized. Your aunt transferred all her assets to your name 2 years ago. She wanted to make sure you would be the one to receive it." Martha stayed silent, just looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. At that moment, the courtroom door opened. The clerk poked her head out. "The Collins case is now being heard. Please enter." We walked in. Daniel was already seated with his attorney. Alina sat beside him. He looked at me with his usual contempt. The hearing began, and then came his outburst, "Take your brat and get the hell out." And then, the arrival of the envelope. And that look on the judge's face, the one that had changed everything. And now, she was about to reveal what was in those documents. The judge slowly arranged the papers before her. The room fell silent. I could feel my heart pounding somewhere in my throat, my palms damp with sweat. Beside me, Martha sat upright, tense. Behind me, I could hear James's heavy breathing. Daniel leaned back, arms crossed, his expression mildly irritated, like he was thinking, "What is this circus? Why the delay? Let's just get this over with." His attorney whispered something in his ear, but Daniel waved him off. Alina sat rigid, tense as a wire. She could sense something was going wrong. The judge finally looked up. First at me, then at Daniel. There was something like satisfaction on her face, quiet, professional, but unmistakable. As if she had been waiting for years for a chance to set things right. "Well then," she began in an even tone, "during this hearing, I was presented with notarized documents from Mr. Edward Barons regarding an inheritance received by Mrs. Linda Collins. These documents are official, duly certified, translated into English by a sworn translator, and apostilled in accordance with international standards." She paused. "Mrs. Collins, please confirm for the record that you are the sole niece and heir of the late Elizabeth Gray." "Yes, I confirm," I managed to say. "Very well. According to the will executed 2 years ago in Vienna, Austria, and notarized there, Elizabeth Gray bequeathed all of her property to you." The judge picked up one of the sheets and skimmed it briefly. "I'll list the main assets included in the inheritance." She began reading slowly, clearly enunciating each word. "An apartment measuring 92 square meters in the central district of Vienna, located at Kohlmarkt, number 17. According to an independent appraisal, the market value of this property is 1,200,000 euros. I heard Daniel shift abruptly in his seat. His lawyer froze, staring at the judge. Alina's mouth fell open. Next, the judge continued calmly, a 40% ownership stake in the publishing company Gray and Partners, registered in Austria. According to the company's most recent financial report, the value of this share is 800,000 euros. The clerk stopped typing. She lifted her head, staring at the judge in disbelief. Additionally, the judge went on, flipping a page: bank accounts in an Austrian bank totaling 500,000 euros, a savings account in a Swiss bank containing 300,000 euros, and a portfolio of securities including shares in Austrian and German companies valued at approximately 250,000 euros. She looked up from the papers. In total, the estate's combined value amounts to 3,050,000 euros. That equals... She punched a few numbers into a calculator approximately $3.5 million at the current exchange rate. The courtroom froze. Absolute silence. You could have heard a pin drop. I sat motionless. $3.5 million. That couldn't be real. Things like that didn't happen, not in real life, not to an ordinary accountant from Seattle. Daniel turned pale. The red drained from his face until it was ashen, almost white. His lips parted, but no words came out. He looked at the judge, then at me, then back at the judge again. His eyes were filled with utter confusion. Daniel's lawyer took off his glasses, wiped them with a trembling hand, and put them back on. His mouth moved silently, as if he wanted to speak but couldn't find his voice. Alina was white as chalk. Her flawless makeup now looked like a mask. Her mascaraed lashes fluttered rapidly. "Mom." I heard James whisper behind me, awestruck. "Mom, is this real?" I turned to him. He was staring at me with wide, astonished eyes, full of joy and disbelief. I don't know," I whispered back. "I don't understand it myself." The judge cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. "It's important to note a legal detail. Under Washington state's marital property laws, any assets received by one spouse as a gift, through inheritance, or other gratuitous means are considered that spouse's separate property." She looked directly at Daniel. "This means that although the inheritance was received after the marital relationship had effectively ended, it still legally falls within the period of marriage. However, it is not subject to division and remains the sole property of Mrs. Collins. Mr. Collins has no claim to it whatsoever. None." The last word she pronounced with firm emphasis. Silence hung for another 10 seconds. Then, all at once, the room erupted. Daniel shot up so fast his chair crashed backward with a loud bang. "What?" he shouted. "What millions? This is insane. It's a setup. She planned this whole thing." "Mr. Collins, sit down," the judge snapped sharply. But Daniel wasn't listening. He stepped toward my table, his face twisted with anger and something else. "Fear? Desperation?" "Linda," he said, his tone suddenly syrupy, pleading. "Linda, sweetheart, come on. You know me. We've spent our whole lives together. I've always said how smart you are, how much I appreciate you. Remember how we started? Together? This belongs to us. Ours?" I didn't recognize my own voice. It came out loud, clear, full of a fury I didn't know I had. I stood up and looked him straight in the eye. "Ours? 10 minutes ago, you screamed at me to take my brat and get the hell out. You called me a hen. Said I'd done nothing, that you built everything. That I'd lived off you all these years." My voice broke into a shout. All the years of humiliation, pain, loneliness came pouring out. "That's not what I meant." Daniel waved his hands wildly. "I was angry, I didn't mean it. You know I've always loved you. This is all a mistake, I can fix this. We don't need to get divorced. Let's go home, start over." "Sit down immediately," the judge thundered, her voice echoing through the courtroom like a gunshot. "Or I will have you removed and issue the ruling without your presence." Daniel's lawyer jumped up, grabbed his client's arm, and pulled him back toward his seat. Daniel resisted, but the attorney was firm. Finally, he sat red-faced, breathing heavily, eyes darting between me and the judge. "Your Honor," the attorney began, trying to compose himself, "please understand my client is in a state of shock. However," he cleared his throat, "I would like to clarify the legal position. Am I correct that this inheritance is not subject to division?" Absolutely correct, the judge confirmed. Furthermore, given the circumstances, the witness statements, and the evidence presented, I find it necessary to revisit the division of the couple's jointly acquired assets. The lawyer went pale. Meaning, the judge said, taking another folder, that the court has determined Mrs. Collins made substantial contributions to the creation of her husband's business. She provided initial funds, managed bookkeeping, and worked 2 jobs to support the family during the company's early years. Though there is limited direct documentation, circumstantial evidence, witness testimony, and the duration of the marriage all point to the conclusion that these assets were indeed jointly acquired. She paused, fixing Daniel with a cold stare. Additionally, Mr. Collins's conduct in this courtroom, his offensive remarks toward his wife, his dismissive behavior, all of this is being taken into account in the court's ruling. The court orders the following division of marital property. She began reading the verdict, the apartment to be split equally, but since the son remained with the mother, a larger portion went to me. The business half to each. The lake house split evenly. The car would stay with him, but he was to pay financial compensation. Daniel sat as if struck by lightning. His world was collapsing before his eyes. Just that morning, he had been certain he would take everything, leave me with nothing, start a new life with his young mistress, live the good life. And now? Now he was losing half of everything, and the woman he had thrown away had become 10 times wealthier than he'd ever be. This isn't fair, he shouted again, but now his voice carried more desperation than anger. I worked my whole life. I built this business. I gave it everything, my time, my health, and she just gets millions handed to her. It's not fair. Mrs. Collins's inheritance is irrelevant to the division of your joint property, the judge said sharply. It is not under consideration in this case. The court is dividing only what was acquired during the marriage. And by law, your wife is entitled to half. In fact, given her contributions and your conduct, I could have granted her more. But, Daniel stammered, unable to find words. His lawyer placed a hand on his shoulder and said quietly, Mr. Collins, please calm down. The court's ruling can be appealed to a higher instance. Right now, it's important not to make things worse. But Daniel didn't listen. He turned toward me, and in his eyes I saw something pitiful, almost pleading. Linda, please, let's talk. Just as people, okay? We've been together for so many years. We have a son. We're a family. I made a mistake, yes, I admit it. But we can fix this. I'll come back, I'll leave her. He jabbed a finger toward Elena without even looking at her. I don't need her. I need you. It's always been you. Elena gasped. Her face twisted in fury. She jumped to her feet, grabbed her purse, turned sharply, and strode toward the exit. At the door, she stopped, glared at Daniel with hatred and disgust. You're pathetic, she spat. A pathetic liar. I wasted a year of my life on you, and you dash. She didn't finish. She just spat in his direction and stormed out. The door slammed behind her. Daniel didn't even look back. His eyes were fixed on me, his hands reaching out almost desperately. Linda, please. I looked at him and felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no triumph. Just emptiness. This man had once been everything to me. I'd loved him, lived for him, given him everything. And now, standing before me, he was a stranger, pathetic and small in his despair. No, Dan, I said quietly but firmly. There's nothing to talk about. You said it yourself. Take your brat and get the hell out. Remember? That's exactly what I'll do. I'll leave. But not because you threw me out, because there's nothing left for me here. He froze, then slowly lowered his hands. The look on his face said it all. He understood. Finally, completely, irreversibly, he understood that he'd lost. The court will recess to finalize the written judgment, the judge announced. Please remain in your seats. The full ruling will be read in 15 minutes. She rose and left the room. I sank into my chair. My hands were trembling. Martha put an arm around my shoulders. Linda, you did great. Stay strong. Mom, did you hear that? Mom, this is incredible. Do you realize what this means? I don't, I admitted. My voice didn't even sound like mine. I really don't. Daniel was still standing by his table. His lawyer was talking to him, but Daniel didn't seem to hear. He just stared into space. Then, slowly, he turned and walked toward the exit. His lawyer ran after him. Mr. Collins, where are you going? The hearing isn't over yet. I don't care, Daniel said dully, without turning around. Do whatever you want. He walked out. I didn't see him again that day. Notary Barons approached me. He, too, looked stunned by what had just happened. Linda, congratulations, he said. Though I understand this isn't the time for celebration. When you're ready, we'll need to process the inheritance documents. It'll take some time, there are formalities, but legally, everything is in perfect order. Thank you, I nodded. I'll call you later. When I've had time to collect myself. He nodded understandingly and stepped away. James sat down beside me, took my hand. Mom, he said softly, I'm so proud of you. You didn't break. You stood your ground. You handled all of this with dignity. I looked at him, my son, my boy who'd grown into a man. His eyes were full of love, of quiet strength. And I thought, this is what real wealth looks like. Not millions of euros, not an apartment in Vienna, This person beside me, who loves me simply for who I am. James, I whispered, this is just the beginning. The judge returned and read the full ruling aloud, with all the legal phrasing: divorce finalized, property division, terms, conditions, obligations. And then it was over. The clerk printed the court order. Martha received her copy, shook my hand. Congratulations, Linda. Justice has been served. I gave a faint smile. Justice? Maybe. But it doesn't feel like victory. We stepped out of the courthouse. The same cold November day greeted us: gray sky, wind, damp air. And yet, somehow, it felt just a little brighter. The first 3 days after the hearing passed in a fog. I couldn't process what had happened. I wandered around the apartment, sat on the couch, stood up, sat again, stared out the window at the gray courtyard, the bare trees, the wet asphalt, and still couldn't believe it. $3.5 million. An apartment in Vienna. A share in a business. Bank accounts. It felt unreal. Things like this don't happen to ordinary people. Only in movies or in books. James tiptoed around me, afraid to disturb me. He made tea, brought sandwiches, turned on the TV. I sat staring at the screen, seeing nothing. On the third day, Tammy called. I told her what had happened in court. She was silent for nearly 2 minutes. Then she exhaled. Linda, you're kidding. No, I said quietly. It's all true. My God, she whispered. Linda, that's fate. Don't you see? Everything you gave, everything you sacrificed, it's come back to you. Maybe not from Dan, but it came back. Maybe she was right. But I didn't feel joy, just a strange emptiness and exhaustion. 26 years of my life were over. Ahead lay something new, unknown, and a little frightening. On the third day, Notary Barons arrived with a stack of documents for me to sign. We sat in the kitchen as he spread the papers out, patiently explaining each one. This is a power of attorney for managing your share in the publishing company until you decide what to do with it. The board of directors will continue running the business as before. Dividends will be paid to your account quarterly, around 20 to 30,000 euros per quarter. I nodded, signing, though everything still felt like a dream. These are the documents for the apartment in Vienna. It's currently vacant. No one's lived there for the past 3 months since Ms. Gray's passing. You can visit whenever you like, see it, decide what to do: sell it, rent it, or live there yourself. Live there? I repeated. In Vienna? Why not? Edward smiled. You have that freedom now. You can live anywhere you want. Anywhere. The word echoed inside me. I'd lived my whole life in Seattle, born there, studied, worked, got married, raised a child. The city had been my home, my cage, my whole world. And now, I could leave. Go anywhere. The bank accounts are already open in your name, the notary continued. The funds have been transferred. Here's your Austrian bank card, and this one's from Switzerland. The PIN codes are in the envelope. You can withdraw, spend, transfer whatever you like. It's your money. I took the plastic cards. Light, ordinary. And yet, they held millions. As for the securities, Barron said, pulling out another folder, I'd recommend not touching them for now. The portfolio is well balanced and generates a steady income. But if you decide to sell or reinvest, I can recommend an excellent financial advisor. A financial advisor. God. Just a week ago, I was counting every dollar, putting aside money for utilities, buying the cheapest groceries. And now I needed a financial advisor. Barron's left, leaving me with the documents, business cards, and contact numbers. I sat in the kitchen, staring at the papers. Then I picked up my phone, opened the banking app, and entered the card details. The screen lit up. Balance, 480,000 euros. I closed the app. Opened it again. The numbers hadn't changed. Mom? James peeked into the kitchen. How are you feeling? I don't know, I admitted. James, what do I even do now? He sat down next to me and took my hand. Live, Mom. Just live. You've spent your whole life giving to others, Dad, me, your job. Now think about yourself. What do you want? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? I thought for a moment. What did I want? Strangely, I didn't know. For 30 years, my life had followed one pattern: work, home, family, repeat. A closed circle. I'd never stopped to think about my own dreams. I'd never had time. I don't know, I said again quietly. Honestly, I don't. Then let's start with the basics, James said, brightening up. Dad still has to pay you compensation for your share, right? And buy out your part of the business if you don't want to keep it? Yes, the judge decided that. Good. Let your lawyer handle that. Then we'll figure out the apartment, whether to keep it or sell it. And after that, he smiled. After that, we can start thinking about the future. A real future, not just surviving. I hugged him. My smart, grown-up boy. James, what about you? Your studies, university, you are not going to drop out, are you? Of course not, he shook his head. I'll finish. I like programming. But, you know, maybe I'll apply for a master's in Europe later, since we now have an apartment in Vienna. We have. Not you have, but we have. That simple word warmed my heart. On the fourth day, Martha called. She said Daniel's lawyer had reached out to discuss the settlement terms and the buyout. He's in a hurry, she said, her voice carrying a hint of irony. Apparently, Mr. Collins realized it's in his best interest to get this over with quickly. He's offering to buy out your share of the business for $800,000. That's a fair price. All right, I agreed. Let him buy it. I don't need that business. And about the apartment, Martha continued. He's offering $400,000 for your half. Or you could keep it and pay him his share. I thought for a moment. The apartment. Our 3-bedroom place where we'd lived for 10 years. Where James grew up. Where we'd had both happiness and heartbreak. Did I even want it? Let him have it, I decided. He'll pay $400,000. James and I will move out. Are you sure? Martha sounded surprised. I'm sure. I don't want to live within those walls anymore. Too many memories. After the call, I sat down and, for the first time in days, began to think clearly, practically. So, I had the inheritance, around $3.5 million. Plus $800,000 for my share of Daniel's business. Plus $400,000 for the apartment. That made $4.7 million in total. An unreal amount. Enough to never work again. I could buy any home I wanted. Travel anywhere. Help James with his studies, his future. I could. What could I? What did I want? I stood up and walked to the window. looked out at the courtyard, the familiar buildings across the street, the playground where James used to play in the sandbox. Everything was so familiar, so ordinary, so dear and yet suddenly distant. Like I no longer belonged here. Like my life here had ended, and something new was about to begin. That evening, James and I sat in the kitchen, drinking tea and eating cookies. He was working on a homework project on his laptop. I was absently flipping through a magazine. "Mom," he said suddenly, "why don't we go to Vienna? Check out the apartment." I looked up. Vienna? Yeah. It's beautiful there in winter Christmas markets, lights. I've never been abroad. You haven't either, right? I shook my head. No, never. Daniel traveled a lot for work, business trips, but he never took me. Said it was too expensive, that the cabin at the lake was enough for us. Let's go, James repeated. You can decide what to do with the place. And you need a change of scenery anyway. You need to get away from all this. Maybe he was right. Maybe I really did need to get out, see something new, think from a distance. All right, I said. Let's go. On the 5th day, I went back to work for the first time since the trial. My boss, Vera, greeted me with a sympathetic look. Linda, how are you? How did the hearing go? It's fine, I answered vaguely. The property's been divided. Well, thank goodness. At least some justice. Men, they're all the same. When they're young, they promise the world, and the moment they have money, they disappear. I nodded and went to my desk. Sat down, turned on the computer. A pile of documents lay before me, bills, invoices, reports. The same routine work I'd been doing for 25 years. I stared at those papers. Then at my desk, old, chipped. At the computer, ancient, lagging. At the window, nothing outside but the gray wall of the neighboring building. My co-workers, tired women my age, worn down by life, work, routine. And suddenly, I realized I didn't want to be here. Not at all. I'd given this job 25 years. Sitting at this desk, counting other people's money, processing other people's deals. For what? To earn a miserable paycheck that barely covered the bills. At lunchtime, I went to Vera's office. Vera, can I talk to you for a moment? Of course, she said, setting down her pen and looking up at me. I want to quit. She blinked. Quit? Completely? But why? You've got tenure, benefits, you are close to retirement. Exactly, I said quietly. Retirement. I'm 49, Vera. I don't want to wait for retirement behind this desk. I want to live. Just live. She looked at me for a long time. Then nodded. I understand. Write your resignation. 2 weeks' notice. I will, I said. That evening, I told James my decision. He hugged me and kissed my cheek. Good for you, Mom. You've spent enough time in that office. On the 6th day, Daniel called. His name appeared on my screen, and for a long moment, I couldn't decide whether to answer. But finally, I did. Hello, I said coldly. Linda, his voice sounded tired, lost. Can we talk? Meet? Why? Just to talk. Like normal people. We were together for so many years. I hesitated, then said, all right. Tomorrow at 1 o'clock. The cafe on Pike Place, the one we used to go to. Thank you, he exhaled. Thank you, Linda. I hung up. James looked at me questioningly. He wants to meet, I explained. To talk. Are you sure that's a good idea? No, I admitted. But I need to close this chapter once and for all. The next day, I arrived at the cafe exactly at 1. Daniel was already sitting by the window. He looked terrible, gaunt, with dark circles under his eyes, unshaven. His suit was wrinkled, his tie crooked. He stood when I approached, tried to smile, but it came out twisted. Hi, he said. Hi, I replied, sitting down across from him. The waitress came over, I ordered a cappuccino. Daniel was already drinking espresso, judging by the empty cup in front of him, not his first. We sat in silence. He stared out the window. I looked down at the tabletop. Finally, he spoke. Linda, I wanted to apologize. For everything. For how I treated you, for what I said in court, for Elena, for leaving you. It was a terrible thing to do. Yes, it was, I agreed. I know you'll never forgive me. You shouldn't. I acted like a complete bastard. He rubbed his face with his hands. I've lost everything, Linda. Elena left me the moment she found out about your inheritance. Turns out, she wanted my money, not me. You still have half the business, I reminded him. And the car. And the cabin. That's not nothing. Compared to what you have. He gave a bitter smile. $3.5 million. An apartment in Vienna. Stocks and bonds. And me? I spent my whole life chasing money, breaking my back, working myself into the ground. And what do I have to show for it? Half of what I had. And you? You got everything just like that. For free. I felt anger rise inside me. For free? I repeated quietly, but there was steel in my voice. You think I got all this for free, Dan? I gave you 26 years of my life. I sold my grandmother's earrings so you could open your first kiosk. I borrowed money from my parents and my sister so you could stock your store. I worked 2 jobs to feed our family while you were finding yourself. I did your bookkeeping for free for 5 years. I washed, cooked, cleaned, raised our son by myself because you were always too busy. And you call that for free? He said nothing, staring down at the table. And that inheritance, I went on, it's not some lucky gift from fate. It's from Aunt Elizabeth, a woman who worked her whole life, saved, invested, and managed her money wisely. She could have left it to anyone. But she left it to me. Do you know why? He shook his head. Because 30 years ago, when I was a student, she came to Seattle and had nowhere to stay. I took her in, gave her my bed, slept on the couch. I cooked for her, showed her around, took care of her. She was 70 then and walked with difficulty. I drove her to the doctor, bought her medicine with my scholarship money. For 2 weeks, I was there for her simply because she was family. And when she made her will years later, she remembered that girl who had given her everything she had. My cappuccino arrived. I took a sip, hot, sweet, comforting. So no, Dan, I said calmly. I didn't get it for free. I earned it. Maybe not through business or hard labor, but through kindness, compassion, and humanity. The things you lost along the way. He sat hunched over, and for the first time, I felt sorry for him. Not the kind of pity that makes you want to go back, but the kind you feel for a stranger who's ruined his own life. Dan, I said more softly, I'm not angry with you. Honestly, I'm grateful. He lifted his head, startled. Grateful? Yes. You set me free. If you hadn't left, I would have stayed in that cage cooking, cleaning, waiting up for you at night. I would have spent the rest of my life in that apartment, proud of your success while forgetting who I was. But now I have a chance to start over, to live for myself. So, thank you. He lowered his head again and sat in silence for a long time. Then he asked quietly, what about me? What am I supposed to do now? Keep living, I said simply. Work. Find love again. Don't repeat your mistakes. Learn to appreciate what you have. I finished my coffee and stood up. Goodbye, Dan. Take care of yourself. I walked out of the cafe and down the street. It was cold and windy, but I didn't feel it. There was warmth inside me, strange, unfamiliar, but deeply comforting. As if the heavy stone pressing on my chest for months had finally fallen away. I took out my phone and called James. James, let's really go to Vienna. For Christmas. We'll see the apartment, walk around the city, and decide what's next. Awesome, he said, excited. I'm already looking at flights. I smiled. For the first time in a long time, it was a real smile, warm and genuine. Life went on. And it finally looked promising. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur. I worked my final days, wrapped up the paperwork, said goodbye to my coworkers. Vera hugged me and said, good for you, Linda. You're doing the right thing. Life's too short to spend it crunching other people's numbers. I bought plane tickets for James and me Seattle to Vienna, December 20th, round trip, 10 days. Meanwhile, I finished the financial arrangements. Daniel transferred the money for the business buyout $800,000 into my account. Then another $400,000 for the apartment. Martha helped with all the legal formalities. Linda, have you thought about where you'll live now? She asked during our final meeting to sign the papers. Not yet, I admitted. I'll rent something for a while. After that, who knows? Maybe I'll stay in Vienna. In Vienna? She raised her eyebrows. For good? I don't know, I shrugged. But why not? There's nothing keeping me here anymore. James can transfer to a European university and finish his degree there. We'll learn the language, settle in, start a new life. Martha nodded. I get it. Sometimes you have to leave the past behind to find the future. At home, we started packing. I pulled out old suitcases, began folding clothes, warm sweaters, important papers, essentials. James packed his gadgets, books, hoodies. The apartment slowly emptied. I sorted through things, putting some into donation boxes, tossing others, setting a few aside to take with us. One evening, I sat on the bedroom floor sorting through a box of old photos. Our wedding, young, happy, in love. Daniel holding me, laughing, kissing me. I wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of daisies. James's birth. Me in the hospital, exhausted but glowing, holding a tiny bundle in my arms. James's first steps. Daniel catching him, tossing him in the air. The lake house barbecue, laughter, summer sun. James's 7th birthday cake, candles, balloons, smiling faces. So many years. So many moments. Warm, beautiful, happy. When did it all go wrong? When did love turn into habit, and habit into irritation? Or was it always that way, and I just didn't see it or refused to? Mom, James said, kneeling beside me, peeking into the box. What's that? Old photos, I said, handing him one. He was about 3, sitting on Daniel's shoulders, both of them laughing. James studied the picture for a while. You know, I barely remember Dad like that happy, I mean. In my memories, he was always busy, tired, angry. He used to be different, I said quietly. Once. Or at least I thought he was. Mom, James said, wrapping an arm around me, don't be sad. That's all the past. We've got a new life now. I nodded and wiped my eyes. Put the photos back in the box, closed the lid. The past could stay where it belonged. A week before our trip, I met with Tammy. We sat in the same kitchen where we'd shared so many cups of tea and tears. So, you're really leaving? Tammy asked, her eyes full of sadness. Yes. For 10 days, just to see. But maybe for good. And what about me? She sniffled. What am I supposed to do without you? You're my only friend, Linda. I took her hand. Tammy, sweetheart, you'll come visit. I've got that big apartment in Vienna now, 92 square meters. You'll come stay with me, see the city. I'm inviting you. Really? She brightened. Could I even afford that? On my teacher's salary? Of course, I said. I'll buy your ticket, don't worry. You've been there for me all these years now, it's my turn. We hugged, sat a while longer, talked about everything and nothing. When I left, Tammy stood at the doorway waving, tears streaming down her cheeks. 3 days before departure, I went to the cemetery to my parents. Mom had died 5 years ago of cancer, Dad, 3 years later, of a heart attack. I hadn't visited often, work, life, never enough time. The graves were simple. Gray granite headstones with their photos, Mom and Dad, young and smiling. I brought chrysanthemums and set them in the vase. Sat down on the nearby bench. Mom, Dad, I began softly, speaking to them in my mind as always. Something's happened. Aunt Elizabeth passed away, you remember her, right? Mom's aunt. She left me an inheritance. A big one. Really big. I guess you could say. I'm wealthy now. The wind rustled the bare branches above. It was quiet, cold, still. I divorced Daniel. He left for another woman. But you know what? I actually feel lighter. Like a weight's been lifted. I'm going to Vienna to see Aunt Elizabeth's apartment. Maybe I'll stay there. Start a new life. James is coming with me. He's a good boy, you'd be proud of him. I sat there for a while longer, remembering my mom, how she baked pies, taught me to knit, told me fairy tales. How Dad carved little wooden toys for me, carried me on his shoulders, sang songs. They were simple, kind people. Worked hard all their lives, saved every penny, lived modestly. And they were happy. Because they had something real, love. I'll come visit, I promised softly. I won't abandon you. I promise. I stood, straightened the flowers, and walked toward the exit. The day before our trip, I stopped by James's school to thank his homeroom teacher, Mrs. Parker. She was a wonderful teacher, supportive and kind, always there for James during tough times. We talked in the teacher's lounge. I told her we were moving and that James would continue his studies in Vienna after completing his first year of college. Linda, I'm so happy for you, Mrs. Parker said sincerely. James is such a talented young man, he deserves opportunities. And in Europe, he'll have them. I wish you both all the best in this new chapter. I thanked her, left my email address, and said goodbye. That evening, the last one before we left, James and I sat in our almost empty apartment. The boxes were packed, the suitcases stood by the door. The furniture remained behind. Daniel would take it or sell it. I didn't care. I walked through the rooms, silently saying goodbye. The bedroom where I'd slept for 10 years. The kitchen where I cooked thousands of dinners. The living room where we celebrated New Year's, watched TV, gathered as a family. James's room, where he'd grown up, studied, become a man. So many memories, good and bad, joyful and bitter. My whole life was inside those walls. Do you regret it? James asked, standing beside me. A little, I admitted. It's hard to let go of the past, even when it wasn't all that happy. But the future's ahead and it looks brighter. We went to bed late. I couldn't sleep for a long time, tossing and turning, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow morning a taxi would take us to the airport. We'd fly to Vienna, see Aunt Elizabeth's apartment, stroll through the city, celebrate Christmas there. And afterward? Who knew? Maybe we'd come back to Seattle. Maybe we'd stay. Maybe this was the beginning of a whole new life. In the morning, I woke up early, even though the flight wasn't until 2 in the afternoon. I showered, got dressed, did light makeup, and looked in the mirror. A middle-aged woman stared back, tired face, but steady eyes. That was me. The new me. James was up too, getting ready quickly. We had coffee in the kitchen, standing there were no chairs left, we'd given them to a neighbor. Mom, James said, you know, I'm proud of you. You're the strongest woman I know. I hugged him tightly. And I'm proud of you. You didn't abandon me. You stayed when your father walked out. That means more than you know. At 10:30, the taxi arrived. The driver helped carry our suitcases. I turned one last time to look at the building, at the windows of our old apartment. Goodbye, I whispered. Thank you for everything. For the good and the bad. It was all worth it. We got in the car and drove to the airport. I watched the city pass by, the streets I'd walked 1,000 times, the parks where I'd played with James when he was little, Puget Sound glimmering gray and cold in the December rain. Seattle was seeing me off with its usual weather, gray skies, drizzle, and wind. We'll meet again, I told the city silently. I'll be back. Maybe not forever, but I'll be back. You're my home, and I love you. But I need to leave. At least for a while. The airport was busy and loud. We checked in, went through security, and entered the departure area. We sat in a cafe, ordered sandwiches and coffee. Nervous? James asked. A little, I admitted. I've never flown before. It's scary. Don't be, Mom, he said, squeezing my hand. Everything's going to be fine. You'll see. They called our flight. We walked to the gate. I look back one more time. Seattle, my life, my 26 years of marriage, my hopes and disappointments all stayed behind. Ahead lay the sky, Vienna, and a new beginning. We boarded the plane. I took a window seat, buckled up. James sat beside me, putting in his earbuds, scrolling through his phone. The plane sped up down the runway, the ground blurred, and then we lifted off. I looked out the window. Seattle was shrinking below us, small, gray, disappearing into the clouds. Then only the sky remained blue, endless, free. And suddenly I understood. I was free. Truly free for the first time in years. I could do anything, go anywhere, live however I wanted. I had money. I had choices. I had my son beside me. And a future I would build myself. I leaned back, closed my eyes, and smiled quietly to myself. Everything was just beginning. Somewhere far below, in Seattle, Daniel sat in his office counting his losses. Alina was already hunting for a new rich man. Martha was preparing for another case. Tammy was teaching her class. Life went on. But my life, my real life, was up here, in the sky. On the way to Vienna. On the way to myself. I remembered Daniel's words in court, "Take your brat and get the hell out." I smiled. Well, Dan, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm taking my brat and leaving. Not because you told me to, but because I chose to. And I'm not just running away. I'm heading somewhere specific toward my new life. Thank you, Dan. Thank you for letting me go. Thank you for showing me that I can live without you. Thank you for giving me the chance to start over. I opened my eyes. Clouds drifted by outside, white, soft, beautiful. Mom, look, James said, pointing at the window. The sun. I looked. Rays of sunlight were breaking through the clouds, bright, warm, golden. Yes, I said softly. The sun. And suddenly, everything felt light. As if I carried a heavy load on my back all my life and had finally set it down. My heart beat evenly, calmly. My breathing was easy, free. Ahead lay Vienna. Aunt Elizabeth's apartment. The Christmas markets James had told me about. New streets, new faces, a new life. And I was ready for it, ready to live, to enjoy, to be happy. Finally. The plane landed in Vienna at exactly 5 p.m. local time. It was already getting dark, the short December day fading fast. I gathered my things, grabbed my bag. James helped with the carry-on. We stepped off the plane and walked down the long corridor toward passport control. My heart was pounding. It was my first time abroad, my first time crossing another country's border. Everything felt strange, the signs in German and English, the foreign voices, unfamiliar faces, a different atmosphere altogether. Passport control went smoothly. The officer, a young man in uniform, glanced at my documents, nodded, stamped them, no questions asked. We picked up our luggage from the carousel and headed toward the exit. A man was standing there holding a sign, Linda Gray. The notary, Behrens, had kept his word and arranged a driver. The man, an older Austrian with a kind smile and gray mustache, took our bags and led us to the car. We drove through Vienna in the evening light, and I couldn't tear my eyes from the window. The city was glowing with Christmas decorations, strings of lights on the buildings, shop windows sparkling, tall trees shining in the squares. People hurried along the sidewalks with shopping bags, laughing, talking. Everything felt festive, warm, alive. It's beautiful, James breathed, pressing closer to the glass. Yes, I agreed. It really is. We passed through the city center. I saw St. Stephen's Cathedral with its tall spire, the Vienna State Opera bathed in golden light, the elegant old buildings with ornate balconies and carved facades. It all felt surreal, like a movie or a dream. Finally, the car stopped in front of a lovely 5-story building. Cream-colored facade, large windows, wrought iron balconies. Clearly an old building, maybe a century or more, but beautifully restored. "We're here," the driver said in slow, accented English. I understood him well enough. James helped unload the luggage. The driver handed me an envelope. It held the apartment key and a note from the notary. "The apartment is on the 4th floor, door to the left of the elevator. Welcome to Vienna." Call me if you need anything. Barron's. We entered the building clean, bright, marble floors, an old mirror on the wall. The elevator was small, lined with wood panels, closed with an iron gate. We squeezed in with our suitcases and rode up to the 4th floor. The door to the left of the elevator solid wood, brass handle. I inserted the key and turned it. The lock clicked. I pushed the door open and froze on the threshold. The apartment was stunning. A spacious hallway with parquet floors, high ceilings with moldings, a grand crystal chandelier. I stepped farther in. The living room huge, about 30 square meters with 2 tall windows overlooking the street. The furniture was antique but elegant, a carved wooden sofa, armchairs, a coffee table, bookshelves lining the walls. Paintings in gilded frames. Shelves filled with books, porcelain figurines, framed photographs. I walked over to one of the photographs. Aunt Elizabeth Young, maybe 40, wearing a neat suit, holding a book. Beside her stood an older man with a warm smile. Maybe a colleague, maybe a friend. I didn't know. Mom, come here. James called from another room. I went in. The kitchen big, bright, modern, yet full of old-world charm. Wooden cabinets, marble countertops, a large dining table for 6. The window looked out onto a courtyard with a tree bare now, but probably beautiful in summer. Next were 2 bedrooms. One clearly belonged to Aunt Elizabeth, a large bed, a dressing table, a wardrobe, everything tidy and cared for. The second, smaller one, seemed to be a guest room. Then the bathroom spacious, with a clawfoot tub and a separate shower cabin. And finally, a steady, cozy little room with a writing desk, shelves of books, and a chair by the window. I returned to the living room and sat down on the sofa. James joined me. So, he asked. I can't believe it, I admitted. This is all mine? It's yours, Mom. Officially and completely yours. I looked around. In the corner stood a Christmas tree, small, artificial, but beautifully decorated. Maybe Aunt Elizabeth had put it up before she passed. Or maybe a neighbor had done it afterward. Underneath were a few boxes, perhaps gifts, perhaps just ornaments. On the coffee table lay an envelope. I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the script elegant and flowing. Dear Linda, if you're reading this letter, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye in person. Life is unpredictable, especially at my age. I want you to know that I didn't choose you as my heir by accident. 30 years ago, when I came to Seattle, you were the only person who showed me real kindness. You gave me your bed, cared for me when I was ill, drove me to the doctor, fed me even though you barely had enough for yourself. You were a poor student, yet you shared what little you had. That's something truly precious. I never forgot your kindness. And when life rewarded me, when I inherited money from distant relatives, found a good job, and managed to save, I decided it should go to you. Because you earned it. Not through work or money, but through something greater, humanity. Live in this apartment if you wish. Or sell it, invest in something of your own. Do whatever you want, it's yours now. I just want you to be happy. I lived a long life. Not always easy, not always happy. I never married, never had children. I devoted myself to my work, to languages and books. Many thought I was odd, lonely. Maybe they were right. But I don't regret anything. It was my life, and I lived it the way I wanted. You're still young, Linda. You have so many years ahead of you. Don't waste them on things that make you unhappy. Life's too short for that. Be happy, dear. You deserve it. With love. Your Aunt Elizabeth. When I finished reading, tears streamed down my cheeks, quiet, warm tears. Not from grief or sadness, but from gratitude. From the overwhelming sense that I wasn't alone, that someone remembered, someone cared, someone wanted me to be happy. Thank you, Aunt Elizabeth, I whispered, looking at her photo. Thank you for everything. James put his arm around me and held me close. We sat in silence for a few minutes. Then I wiped my eyes and stood up. All right, enough crying. Let's unpack and settle in. I'm starving, and I bet you are too. I'll check the fridge. Of course, it was empty. The apartment had been vacant for 3 months. But in the freezer, I found bags of frozen vegetables, and the cupboards pasta, canned goods, tea, coffee. Aunt Elizabeth must have stocked up just in case she couldn't go out shopping. I boiled the pasta, opened a can of stew, and made a simple dinner. We sat at the big kitchen table, eating in silence. Outside, night was falling, lights were flickering on in the neighboring windows. The city lived its own quiet rhythm. You know, Mom, James said, finishing his pasta, I really like it here. It feels cozy. Like home. Yeah, he nodded. It does, I agreed softly. It really does. After dinner, I washed the dishes and tidied up the kitchen. James unpacked his suitcases and put his things away. I took a long shower in that beautiful old tub, hot water, fragrant soap, perfect silence. Bliss. I went to bed in Aunt Elizabeth's room. The sheets were fresh. Apparently the notary had arranged for the place to be cleaned before our arrival. I lay under a warm blanket, staring at the ceiling while the sounds of Vienna drifted in through the window, car horns, voices, laughter. I thought about Daniel. What was he doing now? Sitting in his office, tallying losses? Or maybe it didn't matter. He was part of another life, one that was over. I thought about my job, about Vera, my coworkers, those endless stacks of papers on my desk. Would I really never sit in that stuffy office again, counting other people's money, waiting for payday? I thought about the apartment in Seattle, the empty rooms, the boxes of things, the photos in the closet. And I realized I didn't regret a thing. Not at all. Everything that belonged to that life was behind me now. What I had here was a blank page. A chance to start over. I fell asleep to the soft hum of the Viennese streets for the first time in months, peacefully, without worry, without nightmares. I woke to bright sunlight pouring through the window. I looked at the clock, 10 a.m. I'd slept 12 hours. The last time I'd slept that long must have been 20 years ago. I got up, pulled open the curtains. Outside was Vienna, sunny, crisp, dazzling. Historic buildings with red-tiled roofs, narrow streets, the cathedral spires in the distance. People walking their dogs, carrying groceries, chatting. Ordinary life in an extraordinary city, and to me, it felt like a miracle. I dressed and went to the kitchen. James was already there, sitting at the table with his laptop and a cup of coffee. Good morning, sleepyhead, he smiled. I ran down to the bakery on the corner and got us breakfast: croissants, chocolate rolls. And I made coffee. Thank you, sweetheart, I said, sitting across from him and taking a croissant. It was warm, flaky, and delicious. So, did you master German overnight? He laughed. Not quite, but thank God for Google Translate. The lady at the counter didn't speak a word of English, but we managed with hand gestures. We ate breakfast, drank coffee. Then I said, let's go for a walk. See the city. Sure. We bundled up and stepped outside. December Vienna greeted us with a cold but sunny day. We wandered through the streets, admiring shop windows, old buildings, holiday decorations. Christmas was only 5 days away. You could feel the anticipation everywhere. We stumbled upon a Christmas market, wooden stalls, twinkling lights, music. The air was filled with the smell of roasted chestnuts and gingerbread. People bustled about, shopping for gifts, sipping hot drinks from mugs. Mom, want some mulled wine? James asked. Let's try it, I said. We bought 2 mugs of blue wine, sweet, spiced, steaming. I took a sip, and warmth spread through me. We stood in the middle of the market, drinking, watching the crowd. And I felt good. Simply good for no reason at all. You know, James, I said softly, I think I'm happy. Right now, in this moment, truly happy. He slipped an arm around my shoulders. Me too, Mom. Me too. We spent hours walking. We visited St. Stephen's Cathedral, majestic, ancient, full of history. I lit a candle and prayed for James, for Aunt Elizabeth, for Mom and Dad, for myself. I asked for strength, wisdom, and peace. Afterward, we went shopping. I bought us new clothes, a coat for me, a jacket for James. We stopped at a supermarket and filled our bags with fresh food, vegetables, fruit, fish, cheese, wine. We walked home laughing, juggling the bags between us. At home, I cooked dinner pan-fried fish with vegetables, salad, potatoes. We sat at that big kitchen table, eating, drinking white wine, talking about everything and nothing. Mom, James said suddenly, let's stay here. Not for 10 days for good. I hesitated. Stay? For good? Leave Seattle behind everything familiar? And what about you? Your studies, your friends? Mom, I can finish school online or transfer. My friends will still be around. I can talk to them anytime. But here, there are so many opportunities. I can improve my English, learn German, get into a great university. Mom, this is a real chance. He was right. It was a chance for both of us. To start over, free of the past. All right, I said slowly. Let's try. We'll stay for 6 months, maybe a year. See how it goes. If it doesn't work out, we can always go back. Now we have a choice. Awesome. James jumped up and hugged me. Mom, you're the best. That evening, I sat for a long time in Aunt Elizabeth's study, sorting through her papers, letters, documents, photos. There she was, young and smiling, surrounded by students in a classroom. Here she was in Vienna, standing before the opera house. At a picnic with friends. At her desk, reading a book. A whole life. Lived with dignity, independently, by her own rules. No husband, no children, but full of purpose, work, and passions. And at the end of that life, the decision to leave everything to the one person who once showed her kindness. Thank you, Aunt Elizabeth, I whispered again. I'll try to be worthy of your gift. I'll try to live the years I have left in a way I won't be ashamed of. I promise. The next few days flew by. We settled in, found our bearings, explored the city. We went to museums, theaters, parks. We signed up for German classes. We handled the paperwork for long-term stay. With my inheritance and the apartment, it turned out to be pretty simple. On December 24th, Christmas Eve, we redecorated the tree and dressed up the apartment. I cooked a holiday dinner: fish, salads, pies. We sat at the table together, drank champagne, and made wishes. To a new life, James said, lifting his glass. To a new life, I echoed. We clinked glasses. At midnight, I stepped out onto the balcony. Vienna sparkled with lights below. Bells were ringing somewhere far off. People on the streets were congratulating each other, laughing, hugging. I took out my phone and opened my messages. There were a few. From Tammy, Linda, Merry Christmas. How's Vienna? Write me. From Martha, Linda, Happy Holidays. Wishing you happiness. From my former boss, Vera, Linda, congrats. We miss you here. And one from Daniel. I didn't open it right away. I hesitated a moment. Linda, Happy Holidays. Forgive me if you can. I was a fool. I wish you happiness. Dan. I read the message several times. Then I answered briefly, thank you. You too. There was nothing else I wanted to say to him. I put my phone away and looked out over the city. Somewhere out there, thousands of miles away, was Seattle, my hometown, where my old life had happened. My parents' graves were there, my friends, my memories. I hadn't abandoned it or betrayed it. I'd simply left. I'd let go of the past and stepped into the future. Mom, come here. James called from the other room. The fireworks are starting. I went back inside. We stood at the window and watched the sky explode with color: red, blue, gold, green. The lights washed over the city, turning it into a fairy tale. Beautiful, right? James said. Very, I agreed. He wrapped his arms around me, and I wrapped mine around him. We stood there in silence, looking out at the festive city. And suddenly I thought of Daniel's words, those words in court. Take your brat and get the hell out. I smiled. Yes, Dan. I took my brat and left. But not just anywhere. I chose a direction, the one that leads to happiness. To freedom. To my true self. You wanted to get rid of me, humiliate me, throw me out of your life like junk. But the opposite happened. You set me free. You gave me a chance without even meaning to. And I took it. So thank you, Dan. Really thank you. For the betrayal, the pain, the humiliation. Because that's what pushed me to change. If not for you, I would have stayed in that cage I built for myself cooking, waiting up for you at night, counting other people's money in an office. Until retirement. Until the end. But now I'm here. In Vienna, in Aunt Elizabeth's apartment, with my son beside me, money in the bank, options, a future. I am free. I am happy. I am alive. What are you thinking about? James asked, noticing my smile. About how strange life is, I said. Sometimes it hits you so hard you think it's over that you won't survive it. And then it turns out it wasn't the end at all, it was the beginning. The real beginning. Getting philosophical, he laughed. Good sign. Means your soul's thawed out. It has, I said. Finally. The fireworks ended. The sky went dark again. People in the streets headed home. The city drifted to sleep. We went to bed late. I lay there under a warm blanket, thinking about tomorrow, how we'd walk around the city in the morning, stop in a cafe for coffee and pastries, maybe a museum or the ice rink later, dinner at home and a movie at night. Ordinary, simple things, but so precious after months of stress and pain. And after that? In a week, a month, a year? There would be so many more days. Days of a new life. I'd keep learning German, maybe find a job I actually enjoy, or start something of my own. Maybe I'd travel, the money made it possible. Maybe I'd make new friends or even meet someone. Not to marry again once was enough. Just for company, warmth, human closeness. James would enroll in a European university, learn languages, land a good job. He'd build his own life. Maybe he'd meet a girl, fall in love, start a family. I'd be there, but I wouldn't hover. I'd be a grandma if I got lucky. I'd help, but I wouldn't interfere. I'd live my life and let him live his. All of that would come. It would. Because now I had the means. I had time. I had strength. I was 49. Half my life behind me, but so much still ahead. 20, 30, maybe 40 years. A whole life. New, different, better. And I would live it with dignity. I promised myself. I promised Aunt Elizabeth. I promised Mom and Dad. I promised James. I closed my eyes and smiled into the dark. Outside, Vienna, my new home, slept. And somewhere far away, in cold Seattle, in an empty 3-bedroom apartment, Daniel was probably awake too. Thinking about what he'd lost. About how it could have been different. About how money isn't everything and how chasing it can cost you what's real. But that wasn't my story anymore. Not my life. Not my pain. My story was only just beginning. And it promised to be a happy one. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel. Your support inspires us to keep bringing you new, captivating stories every day. You can already find our next story on the home screen. Wishing you all the very best and a life full of happiness.